Hello everyone, my name is Elle and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be answering some of the questions you guys had in regards to my Pan That Palette 2016 with the Vice LTD. In my finale video I asked you guys if you had any questions and to leave them for me, and quite a few of you had some questions and multiple questions, and that was awesome. So thank you so much for everyone who asked a question, and thank you for everyone who left such kind words of support and encouragement. It really meant a lot to me. Thank you so much. So anyway, I'm just going to get started here with the questions. I have them in order that they were asked. That's the only order I went by here with these questions. I apologize in advance if I happen to get anybody's name or username wrong. Just gonna put that out there. Anyway, let's begin. So the first question I have here is from Daniela, and she asked, do you feel sad that it's done now? Yes and no. But part of me is really glad that it's done because it was a lot of work, a lot of time, and I started to get kind of frustrated during the end there, but I'm a little sad because it was a fun experience. I learned a lot along the way. So it's kind of that feeling like once you've read a book and you know that like twist in it, that twist ending, it's like you can't go back and reread it like the first time you did, because the experience won't be the same because you already know what happens. So that's what makes me kind of sad about it, is that I will never have an experience like this again, because it was my first time doing something like this, doing a palette that was this big and so colorful. The next question I have is from Krista, and she asked, do you have any tips for panning eyeshadow? I get asked this a lot, and you know what? My general answer is you just have to use it frequently, consistently, often. With sparkly, glittery, really shimmery shadows, Fix Plus will help you go through it a lot faster. At least in my experience, Fix Plus has been a lifesaver for me. For those of you who are not familiar with Fix Plus, it's a product from MAC. It's like a setting spray or a fixing spray, or whatever you want to call it. I don't find that sprays like the Urban Decay All Nighter work in this purpose. I think it's because it has glycerin in it. At least that's from what I've read about it, that it helps the shadow adhere better. You can always just use like straight water. I just don't find that the longevity is as good using just straight water. I know some people use like eye drops instead. There's a few other things you can look up if you're curious, like if you're not into MAC or you're cruelty free or whatever, you can look up substitutions for Fix Plus. I highly recommend that if you are trying to get through like glittery, shimmery shadows faster. But in terms of just panning eyeshadow, I really just think you have to want to do it. If you don't want to do it and it's not fun, it's going to be a struggle, and you are going to be fighting against yourself, and it's not going to be worth it. So if you've tried it and it's not worth it, like take a break, stop, maybe revisit it in a little while. Maybe it's not for you. You know, some people, because they have a lot of eyeshadow, want to pan things, and then they are neglecting or overlooking their other shadows, and then they just can't get motivated to use it. So you have to want to pan it, and if you have a really large eyeshadow collection, it may not be the best thing if you don't have any other reasons or places to wear your other shadows. Like for me, I wear other shadows when I film videos. Like I take my break from panning because I wear my panning stuff day to day. So my filming makeup is totally different, but not everybody does what I do. So not everybody might have that opportunity. So, you know, you kind of have to figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I've been panning for like 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. It's been a while, and I've learned a lot along the way. And sometimes when you're new to it, you really just have to try a few different things out and see what's going to be the best method for you. Cheryl asked, would you repurchase a palette of that magnitude again after using all of that one? And this question kind of goes along with one that Faith asked, which is, does panning such a big palette make you hesitate to continue buying big palettes? So those questions are pretty much the same, but I just really liked how both of them were worded, so I wanted to repeat both of them. I am repeating questions like word for word. I haven't changed anything, just to put that out there. But anyway, in terms of like, would I purchase a palette like this again, or does it like make me hesitate? Like absolutely. That is the biggest lesson I've learned from panning this. Like it's the biggest, most eye-opening thing that I never would have thought of if I hadn't spent so much time panning this palette. And I've got to say, it's like the most valuable thing that you know, 13, 14 months worth of panning this like really made it worth it, because now when I'm thinking about purchasing new palettes, I'm really evaluating the palette, and I've thought pretty hard about if I would purchase something like this and why, and what kind of criteria that palette would have to fit into in order to make it worth it for me. And really, I need about 80 to 90% of shadows that I would gravitate towards, that I would willingly want to use. And sometimes it can be kind of hard to judge on the surface, like if you just look at a palette, no swatches, or even if you look at swatches on various skin tones, like unless it's like identical to yours, it's going to be pretty hard to determine how it's going to look on you. So there are those factors, of course, but just in general, like I've learned a lot about finishes I really don't like. I've learned a lot about colors that I don't like, you know, and I'm really going to be considerate about that moving forward. I went through my Sephora like loves wish list and I eliminated a couple of palettes that were on there, because when I really looked at it, I could see that there was a large majority of shadows that I wasn't going to use. Like maybe there was like 60% of a palette that I was drawn towards, and like the other 40% were like, I probably won't touch those. And I was like, that's not worth it to me. Now in general, I really like palettes because the pan size is so much smaller. Like the pan sizes of the Vice palettes are so small, and I don't want to be thinking about panning full size shadows because there's so much product in there. And if a palette has like 80 to 90% worth of shadows and finishes that I really like and would use, then it would absolutely be worth it. And it's kind of like a factoring in a money thing and a usage thing. Like if a palette like this, like if they release a Vice palette that has 20 eyeshadows and I would use 19 out of the 20, then it's worth it to me. I would use those 19 and I wouldn't force myself to use the 20th. So I've definitely learned a lot over this past year and a bit about whether or not I would purchase palettes in the future of all sizes, and what kind of care and consideration I need to put into purchasing so I don't buy things that I don't like and that I don't use. Something Sinful asked, what was the most inspiring color in the palette, and was that different from your favorite color? So I love this question because this gives me an opportunity to talk about Road Stripe, my favorite thing of life. I am obsessed with the shade Road Stripe. If you guys watched my journey with this palette, you'll know at the very beginning I was like, I don't really know what to do with this eyeshadow, I don't get it. I layered it over some other shadows and was like, it's okay, whatever. And then I started reading reviews about this palette because I wasn't quite sure what to do about it. And I was like, what are people saying about it? Like when it came out, what are people saying? What do people like? And I started looking stuff up, and in a review, and I can't even remember where this came from anymore. I think it might have been from like an online magazine or something like that, like the beauty blog. Something's telling me it's like the beauty blog from like Allure or something like that, where someone was talking about Road Stripe being the quintessential 90s cool girl highlight shade. And there was just something about that phrasing that I went, light bulb moment. I'm gonna try Road Stripe as a highlight. And I tried it once and I never looked back, and it's the most amazing thing. I'm wearing it as an eye highlight right now, so it's a brow bone highlight, inner corner, and I'm wearing it as a face highlight because I love it that way. I feel like it's really on trend right now, and I was totally rocking it before it was trendy. Like this is totally the thing that's really on trend right now, and I've been doing it for a couple of months because Road Stripe just completely changed my life, and it was nowhere near my favorite shadow when I started painting this palette. And I actually have two Road Stripe singles because they released it really soon after I finished painting this. Actually, they released it as part of like this capsule collection that was like this throwback like retro collection, because I guess Road Stripe was part of like Urban Decay's original collection back in the 90s. So I do have one still in the box, this one, which is like my travel shadow, and then it actually is in the Vice LTD Reloaded. So that's the one I've been using on a day-to-day, but I have this single that I've opened because if I'm going anywhere, I take it with me. Recently I stayed at my parents' house for a few nights and I brought this with me. So this shadow is beautiful. It's this beautiful duochrome shade. It's got this like blue violet shift in it. I love this so much. I really do. I really do. It's my favorite shadow. When I'm packing my bag to go anywhere, this is basically its own item on a checklist. You know, do I have a foundation? Do I have a face primer? Do I have road stripe? Because I just can't imagine not using this. I use it pretty much daily because I love it. I mean, sometimes I only use a little bit, sometimes I mix it with something else, but I absolutely like can't imagine doing my makeup and not having road stripe most of the time. When I first started panning the palette, Chase was my favorite shadow, and it's still like top 5. I went through and I rated all of my shadows just to kind of give myself a guideline and to really like reevaluate things again and be like, what was I really drawn to? What do I really like? Road Stripe, absolutely number 1, but number 2 would be Chase, which was my favorite when I first started using it. It was the shadow that had the dip in it when I first started it, because this was the shadow that I used the most. It was this like pale gold shade, beautiful, creamy eyeshadow that applied so easily, so smooth, no glitter, but just golden beautifulness, and I love that shadow a lot. It is available as a single as well, and I want to buy it at some point because I really love that shade as well. So it's not like I went from loving a shade to hating a shade, but it definitely dropped down because of how I discovered Road Stripe. And the second question from Something Sinful, was there any color combos that you are surprised that you loved? Well, Road Stripe, I mean, I'm surprised that I loved it as much as I did because, you know, no one could have ever told me that. If someone told me at the beginning when I started painting this palette that they would say at the end of this, Road Stripe is going to be your favorite shadow and you can't live without it, I would have been like, yeah, okay, whatever, don't believe you. I really like the combination of Crystal and Chase. Crystal was this pale blue color and Chase was that gold, and I was inspired by an early morning sunrise where I saw those colors in the sky, like the really pale golden color and the really light blue, and I was like, that is really pretty. And then I looked at it in the palette and I was like, I'm putting that on my face, and I really liked the combination a lot, and I never ever would have thought of putting those things together. There's been color combinations I've discovered kind of within and without this palette, but because of this palette. So like a purple shadow on the lid with a matte pink in the crease, really like that. A pink in the crease with gold on the lid, like that was something I did do with Chase and with Junk Show. Junk Show is the pink shade that was in this palette. That was something I discovered. A blue on the lid with a peach on the lower lash line, or a peach on the lid and the blue on the lower lash line. Something else I like, although the blue in the shadow was like the worst thing in my entire life, and I never ever want to go near a blue sparkly eyeshadow again. Anyway, so yeah, those are some of the color combinations that I really hadn't thought of before I started painting this palette. And I will say, when I got near the end and all I had left was like the blue and the greens and the purple, I was like doing Google searches all the time, like color combinations, what complements purple, what complements green, what can I go with this, and I was on like paint swatch websites looking at like different, I was really into this, and it was a lot of fun, and now I'm going to be able to apply that in the future, and it's helped me be even more creative with my makeup. Technicolor Beaches asked, how long did each shade take on average? That's really impossible for me to determine. I've been thinking about it and trying to figure out like, okay, what would be an average time? I can't even guess. I can't even guess how long it took. I mean, it took me about 14 months, roughly, to finish this palette from start to finish, and there's 20 shades. So some shades were easier to finish up than others, but I can't really put a specific time frame on it. Lena7623, Jess asked, what was your favorite look? I can't think of one on the top of my head, like a wow favorite, this was my favorite thing that I ever did. Anything I did with Road Stripe, really liked. When I used Chase on the lid and Road Stripe as a highlight, I really, really liked that. I really love the combination of gold eyeshadow always, and when I add Road Stripe to it, it just adds that little something special, and I just really liked that a lot. And I really liked doing a very cool toned look where I used mostly Perversion on my lid, like a soft smoky eye, and then I did a cool tone nude lip, and I really loved the way that that turned out. Like, I looked at it and I was like, this is really cool. I never would have thought about this because hey, I am cool toned, let's do a cool toned eye and a cool toned lip and do the whole thing, and it looked amazing. So that was something that I really liked, but like, I don't have like a number one favorite. I don't really have a number one favorite makeup look in general. I just love playing around with makeup so much that I kind of bounce around all the time where I'm like, I like this, I like this, I like this, I like this. I don't really have a go-to. I don't really have thing that I rely on or a favorite. I love a lot of it. Beauty and Me 814 asks, what brushes do you use? I use a lot of brushes. I have 3 cleaned out 3-wick like candle jars like this there that have my eyeshadow brushes in it, because I have a lot of brushes and I use pretty much all of them all of the time. I wouldn't say every day because that'd be insane, but I rotate through brushes and I don't use any particular ones consistently. I did pull a couple to mention more about like the shape of them than the brush itself. This is I think it's a 242 from MAC. It's this like flat shader brush. This kind of brush is perfect for using with those like metallic glittery shades with Fix Plus. It just picks up the pigment so well, and I just find that like I love this brush so much because everything just blends so easily. It's a perfect brush for lid shades especially. And another MAC brush that I use a lot, this is a 219. This is a pencil brush, and I love using a pencil. I need to clean this one is dirty, but I love using this on my lower lash line and even on the outer corner and sometimes into the crease, depending on what kind of look I'm doing. I like this kind of pencil brush because it's not scratchy, it's really soft, but it's still dense enough that like the product doesn't fall everywhere, because that's a problem I have sometimes when I'm doing like lower lash line stuff, is that if you use a brush that's more loosely packed, you'll have pigment fall down your face, and this one's more dense, so I like that. And then for a blending brush, I have like 6 of these. This is Still Spa Essentials. I bought this at Walmart. They're like $2.99. They're so fluffy and I love the size of them. Like, they're not so loosely packed. Like, a lot of people like the 217 from MAC and stuff like that, but I find that's too big for my eye shape, and it's good for if I really want to do like something more blown out. But when I want to sort of contain my eyeshadow a little bit more, I like this because it's somewhat smaller, but it's still really fluffy and it really helps blend things a lot. That's why I have so many of them, because they're so cheap and I love them. So these are like kind of the 3 that I reach for a lot, and variations of them, but I really just go through my brush stash and use a rotation of them. And she also asked, what's your technique when using them wet? Does it go faster that way? So as I did mention earlier, it does go faster that way with those metallic glittery shades. I don't use matte shadows wet because I find that it really ruins the shadow and doesn't work in my favor at all. With the metallic glittery ones, most of the time I would only use them wet anyway, so spraying Fix Plus directly into the pan, which I know like you're not supposed to do, people are like, don't do it, just spray your brush, but I find just spraying my brush did not work for me. Like, people say to pick up the pigment on your dry brush first and then spray your brush with Fix Plus and then put it on your eye, and I'm like, that never worked for me. That just was a huge mess. I just found it so much easier to spray a few like drops, controlled drops into the pan, and then dip my brush in it, and like I could swirl it around enough and I could get proper pigment, especially when I used a brush like that 242 brush. And it worked so well for me, and it made the shadows apply so much better. And yeah, it might ruin the shadows, but I only spray Fix Plus into the pan if I can't use it another way. Like, I'm not going to ruin it, or I would only spray it in like one corner of it, something like that, so I'm not using the whole thing unless it was a really crappy shadow like some of these were. So that works the best for me. Not really a technique, but I find that spraying the pan with Fix Plus works better for me than spraying a brush or whatever else people might do. If you really wanted to be super hygienic, you could maybe get a little bit of the shadow on your hand, spray a little Fix Plus, mix it up all together like you would with like a loose pigment or something, but that's too much work. I ain't doing that. Spraying it into the pan works fine for me.